Hello, and yes, more biology today. Thanks for being here. We are going to be learning about organic compounds and functional groups. Do not do not be afraid. This is nothing to be scared of. Um, if you've done some biology before, you might have come across these, in different capacities, and maybe you didn't have the best initial experience with organic compounds because it can be very daunting. Now, I'm not going to say that this is necessarily going to be something uh, that will be easy to you, but it depends on who you are. But I'm going to make it as simple as possible for us. Remember, I'm going to take out a lot of the fluff and get down to exactly what you need to know. Now, this is streamed initially on Twitch, so there may be some interaction with the audience, but please put some comments down and some questions if you have any. If you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're at, I will be looking at them. So, without further ado, let's look at organic compounds. Now, we all know that our body's life is made up of atoms. And in particular, life has some atoms, some elements that it uses all the time: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and a few others like sulfur and nitrogen as well. So we're going to look at those and how they're arranged to make life possible. So, first off, your carbon is amazing. That carbon that makes you up, and this is why we say we have carbon based life, this works because carbon only has 4 valence electrons. It can therefore have 4 nice strong covalent bonds. So if we draw carbon, we can see that it has these 4 bonds that it can make, and they can bond with other things. We can bond with another carbon, which can bond with another carbon. And these can then branch off, and we can make what's called a carbon skeleton. A carbon backbone is often what it's called as well. Now, if it's just carbon and hydrogen, we call it a hydrocarbon. And you may have heard of hydrocarbons when we talk about things like petroleum products and plastics. So a lot of times our hydrocarbons, right, these just contain different amounts of hydrogen and carbon. We can have other things as well come off of the carbon or that carbon skeleton. And this is where we get into functional groups. And this is where it becomes exciting, and we can get all those other things that make up life. Those macromolecules that you've heard about, things like lipids and proteins. These are the things that really make life possible. So we're going to build up, and carbon is the basis for all of that because of its particular chemical properties and its ability to make these strong covalent bonds. So don't forget that. Now, when we have other things come off of this carbon skeleton, these are the functional groups. And these functional groups have specific properties that then give their properties to that molecule that it's being made up. So they attach to this carbon skeleton. So we can add things like, maybe we will add here, right, a carboxyl group. Okay. And so this is where we start to get some different interesting properties. As you should know already, if you watched the previous video, this, is electronegative, and that'll be given a negative charge, and that then makes it polar, so it will dissolve in water. Now, this is very important because life exists in water. We're just big bags of water, essentially, floating around in our cells there, made almost all of water. So those things that are in our bodies need to be able to dissolve in water and work with water. So often these are, right, hydrophilic, water loving. So once they become, ionized, they have a charge, they become polar. All of these except the methyl group, right? That methyl group will actually is non-polar, right? And that gives it its own property. So when making proteins fold. Now, generally what you're going to have to do in a biology class, and if you're just in high school, like a beginner high school class, you probably won't need to memorize functional groups. If you are in a higher level, like an advanced biology, or you are in a college level class, you will probably have to memorize all of your functional groups. I encourage you, when doing this, by the way, Aquarium Outlaw, thanks for stopping by. I encourage you, when doing this, to make flashcards, right? And to just practice drawing them over and over again. So you got to memorize. Biology, if you didn't realize yet, is a lot of memorization. There's mnemonics and things that you can use to help you memorize this, but you got to memorize them. So get cracking on it. I'm going to go through and draw each of these and kind of explain a few things I know that confused me when I was first learning them, and I think also confuse a lot of students when they first get into learning the functional groups. Okay, but they're very important, and as you go through your year in biology, all the way through your molecular piece about the cell, to genetics, through even ecology, you will come across these functional groups over and over and over again. And the better you understand them, the more purposeful you can do things like organic chemistry. You kind of know its place within biology. So I'm going to go through each of these functional groups, and we'll talk about each one a little bit, because one of the things that biologists love to do is try to confuse their students by having the same different words meaning the same thing. It's rather annoying, but it is the way it is. It happens quite often. All right, now the first thing we want to know is that this section over here, okay, all right, this is often called what we have as an R group, right? When we talk about function, this sometimes isn't like lined out precisely in textbooks or even by your professor. They just kind of write the letter R on there, and you're supposed to know what it means. That R group is just a way to represent all that carbon skeleton you don't want to draw. So that carbon skeleton we're just going to represent with an R. So when we draw our hydroxyl group, our hydroxyl group, we're going to do an R, which is just that skeleton backbone, and CH. Oops, this is our methyl. I already screwed up, didn't I? This is going to be R and OH. Notice we have our R group. We're going to have our methyl next, and that'll be RCH3. Now we need to know a little bit about chemistry here, all right, to know that it's the H that's attached to our hydrogen attached to our oxygen. Know that there are 3 hydrogens here attached to this carbon, right? So we're not doing that stick model all the way out with it. We're just combining it into that CH3, that methyl group. Now hydroxyl groups, if something has a hydroxyl group, this is often called an alcohol, right? So this is where you would commonly see that: ethanol, methanol. Okay, methyl groups, these will attach to DNA to alter gene expression. Next, we're going to have a few other groups. We get a little more complicated here. we're going to have our carbonyl. All right, group. And this is just going to be like this. All right, so this is our carbonyl group. And we are also going to have our carboxyl group. And this is going to be basically in same thing as up here. We're going to have a carbon. We're going to have this, but we're also going to have a hydroxyl group off of it. That's why we have the XYL, the xyl group, coming off of that. Okay. And this would be our, our R group coming off over here. So these are, I think, two of the ones that we can easily get confused. That carbonyl and our carboxyl groups can get kind of mixed up. I always think of this looking more like an X, if that helps you remember it all. It may or may not help you remember it. I don't know. Right. So next, we're going to go through and we're going to look at our amino group, or amine group. Sometimes you will see different names for these, and they might be written different ways. Sometimes you will see this actually as an NH3. Sometimes you'll see it as an NH2, depending on what charge that has. So don't be surprised, if you see it written some other way. Sometimes these are written like this carboxyl, the H is missing, and you just have a negative charge on it. It's the same thing. It's just showing the charged ion form of that functional group. So don't get all bent out of shape. Oh, my professor, showed us this, but online I looked it up and it had this. It's the same thing. Okay, it's just written somewhat differently. And you'll see this, like I said, I swear we do this in biology just to confuse students. You'll see the same thing written different ways, or told different ways as well. So amino or amine. Right. So I've seen it written amine. I've seen it written amino. There are technical terms for this, but I just don't worry. We're just going to use them interchangeably. We also have a phosphate. Right. In our phosphate group, here we have our R come here. And this is most famous, of course, for adenine triphosphate, the energy currency of the cell. And this, again, your phosphate group, sometimes it'll have an OH, right? Sometimes it'll just have an O and have a charge. So you could see it either way. You might also, I've seen it written like this with the R, but then I've seen another O coming off of it, because often one phosphate group is bound to another phosphate group. Okay, so I've seen it both ways, and I'm telling you right now, just know whichever one your teacher is using and kind of go with that. So you can look at your textbook, right, and you might see other things as well. So, but often there is an O here, not an R group. So just FYI. Okay. Next one. All right. We already did our methyl group. And lastly, I am going to add one more that is not extremely common, but we do see it occasionally, and this is the sulfhydryl. And the sulfhydryl, this is often not not common. Um, it's not included on a lot of lists of functional groups, but it is a functional group. This is one of those trace ones. Now, we could look and see that we know that carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are the leading elements in life, but here we see some other elements being used in these functional groups, right? We have this phosphorus, we have sulfur, and we have this this N. So, and this is I like to say amino because we can then easily connect it to our amino acids, which are making up our proteins. So we can automatically make that connection in the future. So we can see how important these functional groups are for what we're doing in biology as we go through all of these future units. So do not put a too fine a point on it. Knowing these functional groups really well is extremely important, and it will help you better master the material yet to come. If you have a strong foundation in understanding these functional groups, how they connect to this carbon skeleton, um, and where they can be found within biology. So, thank you for watching. This has been great talking to you about this, and wait for the next video, and hope you can watch then. Don't forget to watch any of the previous videos, and pop down to subscribe or a like. Appreciate it. Later.